property may later be annexed by the nearby municipality. This is huge, guys. If your client wants to move into the county because they want to have horses and they want to have goats and they want to have chickens or whatever they want to have, whatever they want to do, and what they do doesn't allow them to be within the city limits, they may right outside the city limits, and then they're incorporated 2 years down the road, they're going to be frustrated and they're going to be angry. So you need to make sure you understand whether they're in that annexation plan or not. A very important thing. Appraisal evaluation of the property. Appraisal renders an estimate of the value as of a certain date. Appraisal is not the same as an inspection. Right now we need to do a good job of really, really explaining to our clients what an appraisal is, what it is not, what it can and cannot do, and how important it truly is. Brokers, making sure you understand what, the very first form you ever give out is the information about broker services form. But again, explaining the difference between who the real estate broker represents, either the buyer or the seller or within an intermediary. Remember, guys, if you do not fill out the information about broker services form on the first substantial dialogue, you're breaking the rules, one. But two, it's a huge disadvantage. It's a great opportunity to explain what the benefits are to have a real estate broker for a buyer and for a seller, and to have that conversation and understanding. Environmental concerns, there's quite a few different concerns to talk about. General concerns. Over the years, the market's identified environmental conditions that buyers should know may exist. Environmental hazards, including but not limited to asbestos, lead-based paint, mold, pesticides, radon gas, toxic waste, underground storage tanks, formaldehyde insulation. All these things can be a huge issue. And this is just saying, hey, what you never want to hear later is you never told me. Hey, man, not only did I tell you, you signed it, that you received it. Environmental inspections, if the buyer's concerned about them, that environmental hazards, wetlands, or endangered species may be present on the property, buyer should hire a qualified expert. Lead-based paint, again, the year 1978 should be so ingrained in your head where the first thing you do when you're going to list or sell a home is look at what year that home was built. So for a fact if you need a lead-based paint addendum, because it is extremely, extremely important to have in that file. If you're representative of the buyer, not only do you have to have that form, but you have to have given your client the pamphlet Protect Your Family from Lead in Your Home. That is a TXR form 2511. It is available in .loop. It is available online. It is available wherever you need to have it. So there's no excuse not to give it to your clients. Mold. Not uncommon to find mold spores in a property. Definitely more common where there's more water and more moisture, but that can be found in El Paso as well. Oak wilt disease trees, just explaining, if you're worried about a tree and what you can do. Noise. Surrounding properties are used for a variety of purposes. Some of these can cause noise. Airports, railroads, highways, restaurants, bars. In El Paso, we had a situation where all of the neighborhoods kept suing a bar because of all of the issues that would happen late at night when the bar was closing. There were fights, there were people driving drunk, huge issues that come into play. So making sure you know the area of where you're moving your family or you're moving these families in is important. Soil conditions vary greatly throughout Texas. Many soils will move, some more than others. So warning them, hey, if you're worried about the soil and what it's built, the foundation it's built on, there are tests that you can do. FERPTA, explaining the Foreign Investment in Real Property Act. Making sure buyers understand they're actually responsible to make sure that the seller is not a foreign person. And if they are a foreign person, they're responsible for making sure that the taxes are withheld. Flood insurance, floodways, flood hazards. Many properties are in flood hazard areas. Lenders to make loans on properties located in special area flood zones typically require the owner to pay flood insurance. Flood insurance can be extremely, extremely expensive. It can be the difference between qualifying for a home and not qualifying for a home if there is flood insurance required, because it can change the monthly payment that substantially. So making sure whether it is or not in a flood area, extremely important. Historic or conservation districts. If you're in a historic or conservation district, you are very limited on how you do repairs, what kind of repairs you're allowed to make, if you're allowed to bulldoze the property. These are things you need to know. If someone buys a house because they want to renovate it, and then they find out it's going to cost 5 times more than they thought it would to renovate it because they have to use certain materials and certain paints and go through all these permitting and inspections, it may change their ability to purchase the home. So having that understanding is huge, and having that understanding that you've given that notice to the client is huge as well. Inspections, repairs, and walkthroughs. Talking about inspectors. Again, anytime the real estate commission underlines something or bolds something, it's important. And here we're talking about inspections. The buyer should accompany the inspector during the inspection and ask the inspectors questions. Brokers and agents do not possess any special skills, knowledge, or expertise concerning inspections or repairs. When I talk to my clients, I say very clearly, listen, I am not a builder, I'm not a contractor, I'm not an electrician, I'm not a plumber, I'm a realtor. I'm not going to tell you how good the roof is. I'm not going to tell you how good the electrical is. That's not what I do. We are going to hire a qualified inspector who's going to inspect this home. He's going to tell us the issues that we have. We're going to decide which ones are important that we're going to ask to have fixed, and we're going to move forward. Repairs. Buyer and seller should resolve in writing any obligation and any timing of obligation to complete requires. Walkthrough. Before close of the sale, the buyer should walk through the property and verify any repairs that are complete. If you do not walk through that property prior to closing, you are setting yourself up for a huge disaster. You're telling your client, we need to get in there before closing and make sure we look at that house. Mandatory owners associations. An owner association may require a property owner to be a member. That will not only change the amount of monthly payments every month substantially, but it could change requirements. What they're allowed to do or not do, colors they're allowed to paint their home, ratios of grass to rock in their yard. All these things can be required in a homeowners association. And if they don't want that and don't want to be part of that, you need to know that going into it. Mineral interest. Realistically, most of the times, if you're in a subdivision, mineral rights have already been sold. So what happens with gas or oil or anything that you find in the backyard and who it belongs to? Multiple listing services, making sure you understand that the broker or agent who provides information within us does not verify the accuracy of the information. Buyers should independently verify the information nonetheless and not rely on the information. Letting you know it's a service that we use, but it's not something we guarantee. Permits. Permits may required to construct, alter, or repair a property. And you want to go back and make sure all those permits have been done. Because if you buy the house, find out some permits were not done, you're responsible for fixing those. Possession. Explaining when possession occurs, either upon closing and funding or according to a temporary residential lease that we agree to. And we'll get into temporary residential leases. I know we've done them in the past. They're tricky, and making sure you understand how the possession works and what can happen after possession occurs is extremely important. It can change a deal very much. So explaining to your clients, hey, possession either occurs upon closing and funding or according to a temporary residential lease or written lease required by the parties. Property insurance. Promptly after entering into a contract to buy a property before any option period expires, buyers should contact an insurance company to determine the availability and affordability of insurance for the property. If it's a situation where that home will be very expensive to insure or have some issues, you need to know that right away while you're still in your option period. Property values. Real estate market is cyclical and current property values may fluctuate. Brokers and agents cannot guarantee desired future market conditions or property values. Ultimate decision on the price and terms the buyer's willing to pay and the seller's willing to sell for specific property rests solely with the buyer and seller. Right now times are really, really good for sellers, and it's a little bit harder for buyers to find properties. Well, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 20 years ago, it may have been vice versa. So the market will always be changing up and down in that regard. Residential service contracts, just discussing a residential service contract is a product under which a residential service company for an annual fee agrees to repair or replace certain equipment or items in the property, and it's not required, and there's multiple residential service contracts out there. Again, this form is just there to do a quick line by line of everything that we're explaining in the contract to greater detail. Making sure, hey, you've seen it in the contract, now you've seen it here as well. Making sure you understand what we're looking at and what we're going with. Restrictions on the property near an international border. Be aware that in certain counties located near an international border, Texas, El Paso, Texas law may prohibit the sale of property lacking required water and sewer services. Even if the sale of such property is permitted, a buyer may face additional costs or restrictions under Texas law due to lack of basic infrastructure. Texas Realtors publishes a form titled Information Regarding Property Near an International Border, which goes into that. And it's one of those things where we have to make sure that that property has water and sewage before we can sell it. School boundaries may change and are at times difficult to determine. School boundaries that an agent may provide or that may be provided through a multiple listing service are not mapped estimates that are sources. Buyers encouraged to verify with the school district which schools residents the property will attend. And a lot of our schools have actually gone to open enrollment, which allows more and more for moving students between schools. Now, this is a huge time to talk about this. I was going to talk about it more in two paragraphs from now. But remember, we as real estate professionals, we are not givers of information. We are givers of where to find the information. What I mean by that, it's not, I strongly recommend not saying which schools are good, which schools are bad, but giving the information of, hey, this is where you can go to find out where the schools are graded. Don't be the one saying this is a good school, this is a bad school, because that could come back on you very, very hard. Unless your job, and I don't think it is to judge and grade schools. That's not the information you should be handing out. Septic tanks and on-site sewer facilities. Many properties have septic tanks or other on-site sewer facilities. There are several types of such systems. Special maintenance requirements may apply to certain systems. Please refer to your document information on site sewer facility. If your property does have a septic system or on-site sewer facility, make sure you're using this form. Make sure you know what needs to be done. This next one is going right back to what we were talking about with school boundaries, sex offenders, and criminal activity. Neither a seller nor a seller's agent of a residential property has a duty to disclose any information about registered sex offenders. If the buyer is concerned about sex offenders who may reside in the area, you can access, and it takes you right to the link where to go for the sex offender registry. Contact the local police department to obtain information about any criminal activity in the area. Now, I warn you, before you click that link for yourself, it's a terrifying link. There's a lot of dots, and it will really ruin your day. So be careful when you're doing that. But make sure you give that information to your clients. They need to know. But if they sit there and say, hey, are there any sex offenders in the area? Are there any criminals in the area? Is this a high crime area? Be very careful of those questions. Give them the where to go for the statistics, but be very careful about just flat out saying this is a high crime area, this is a good area, this is a bad area. You say this is a great area, nothing happens, and something happens to them, they may come back at you and say, hey, you said it was great, and I got attacked. Square footage. If the purchase price is based on the size of the property's building and structures, the buyer should have any information the buyer receives about the square footage independently verified. So the square footage information comes from other sources, such as appraisal districts, appraisers, builders. Such information is only an estimate, and the actual square footage may vary. The problem is square footage is decided by people, appraisers, central appraisal district, all those things. I could send two appraisers to a property and come up with two different numbers. That doesn't mean one person's lying and one person's not. It's interpretation. There's different things. One person's obviously wrong, but it's not my job to make that decision. If an appraiser comes, if I go an appraiser and it says this is the square footage, that's the square footage personally I'm going to use because it's gotten off of the appraisal, and appraisers have the ability to give us that information. But be very careful about just assuming or just taking a seller's word for it, saying, oh no, it's 2,900 square feet. Okay, then I'll put that. Make sure you get information that you can rely on. Verify and have proof of where you got that number from. Statutory tax districts. Property may be located in a utility or other statutory created district, providing water, sewer, damage, or flood control facilities and services. Remember, these are all part of the notices that you have to give that are in the 1 to 4 family contract already. Just throwing it in their face, saying, hey, you've received this, you understand this, you're doing that. Surveillance. Be aware when viewing a property, a seller might record or otherwise electronically monitor a buyer without the buyer's knowledge or consent, and a buyer may photograph or others record the property without the seller's knowledge or consent. Parties should consult an attorney before recording or photographing another person or property. And this is on both sides. We've got to be very careful about what you're recording if you represent a seller. If you have audio, video, you're not allowed to be doing recording audio if neither party is is aware of they're being recorded. So if you've got a buyer and a buyer's agent out there looking at a property and you're recording them in audio, you can get in some serious trouble. So make sure you know what the rules are. Consult an attorney what you can and can't do. Same is true for sellers. Understand if you got pictures of kids or different things or valuables, that someone could come through and take pictures of the pictures on the wall or of the valuables that you have, and it's just something that you need to be aware of. Survey. A survey identifies the location of boundaries, major improvements, fence lines, drives, encroachments, easements, and other items of the property. Buyer should determine a survey early enough in the transaction to help the buyer identify any encroachments, encumbrances, to title restrictions. Synthetic stucco, sometimes known as EIFS, is an exterior siding product that was placed on some properties in the recent past. Product was not properly installed. It has been known to cause damage to the structure, such as wood rot and moisture. So making sure you understand if there's a synthetic stucco issue that is there. Tax prorations, making sure people understand the owner's paying taxes from the day of January 1st through day of closing. Escrow agent will estimate at closing the taxes for the current year if the seller is qualified for tax exemptions. Such exemptions may or may not apply after closing, and after closing, taxes will increase before the exemptions may no longer apply. When buying new construction, the tax at closing may be prorated based on the land value only and will later increase when the appraisal district includes the value of the property. Termination option. Most contract forms contain an option clause which provides the buyer with an unrestricted right to terminate the contract. Most buyers choose to buy the termination option. The buyer will be required to pay for the termination option in advance. Option fee is negotiable, but most buyers will conduct many of the reviews, inspections, and other due diligence during the option period. Tidewaters. Again, not a huge thing in El Paso, but something you need to know about for the rest of Texas. If property joins any of the state's tide waters, the seller will provide the buyer with a prescribed notice titled a dinner for coastal area notice, Texas TXR Form 1915. Again, not something we use a lot of here in El Paso. Boundaries of properties along such waters may change and building restrictions will apply. So understanding what you can and cannot build is important if you are on the ocean. Title insurance or abstract of title. Buyer should obtain a title insurance policy or have an abstract of title covering the property examined by an attorney. If buyer obtains a title insurance policy, the buyer should have the commitment or title insurance reviewed by an attorney not later than the time required under the contract. Utilities. Buyer should evaluate what utilities the buyer will require and check to be sure that the utilities available in the area suit the buyer's needs. Some structures may or may not have utilities and electrical facilities to support many modern appliance and equipment. Water level fluctuations, again, not a huge thing in El Paso, but state law requires the seller to notify a buyer of property that adjoins a lake, reservoir, or other impoundment of water with the storage capacity of at least 5,000 acre feet at its normal operating level, that the water may fluctuate. You need to know that, more water may be in or less water depending on what's going on. Water wells. If the property has a water well, the buyer should have, and the lender may require the equipment inspected and water tested. Buyer should also determine if the county requires any registration or other action to begin using the well. Wire fraud. This has become a huge thing. Again, you see it is underlined to make sure you understand it. Criminals are targeting real estate transactions by gaining access to electronic communications or sending emails that appear to be from a real estate agent, title company, lender, or another trusted source. Refrain from transmitting personal information such as bank account numbers or other financial information via unsecured email or other electronic communication. If the buyer receives any electronic communication regarding wire instructions, even if the communication appears to come from a legitimate source, buyer should verify the authenticity prior to transfer of funds in person or via phone call using a recognized phone number that is not found in the communication. Always, always, always double, triple, quadruple check the wire information that you're giving out. Call the title company and say, hey, I want to make sure this is the right information. They will do the same. Don't just if you get something that says, we changed it here, use this one now, be afraid and be worried. The information is there. Broker or broker's associate signs, buyer or seller signs, and it's done. It is just another verification that you have given this notice to the buyer or the seller. And it's a great form that we really just kind of glance over sometimes, don't use as often as we should, and just something to think about. So again, guys, this form, it may require a little bit more conversation. Just say, hey, pretty much the stuff that we went over in the contract is kind of spelled out in these 5 pages as well. Just making sure you understand what we're talking about, how and why. The other form I want to go over real quick is the notice of withdrawal of offer. In the current market, we're getting multiple offers. Sometimes we're going back and forth. If another offer comes along, or we find a different house we want to use, sometimes we just send an email that says, hey, we've canceled our offer. My recommendation, use the notice of withdrawal of offer form. It is just a much better form. It is form number TX 1945. To buyer or seller, from buyer or seller, the offer concerning the property at, put in the address, check one box. This notice is to confirm that buyer or seller has withdrawn previously or submitted counteroffers to purchase or sell the above referenced property. The withdrawal was communicated orally by, put in, if it was the agent, given notice to, put the name of the other agent, whoever it was, on date and at time, or the buyer or seller withdrawals all previously submitted offers, counteroffers to purchase or sell the above referenced property. Just a much cleaner, smoother process. Sign, date, you're done. Because if you never counter an offer or withdraw an offer, they come back and say, okay, it's accepted. We moved on. Well, it's accepted. You're in breach of contract if you don't play ball. And so in the current market, there's a lot of offers floating around. There's some counter offers throwing around. And the reverse could be true too. If the seller sends a counter offer and then while waiting on that counter offer to be accepted, gets a better offer, filling out this form saying, hey, I withdraw my counter offer and accepting the other offer, is allowed. But if you just accept the other offer, move on, that other offer may have been accepted, and now you've got two people who've got a legitimate contract to buy your home. It's a huge issue that you don't want to be in. This form, use it, take advantage of it, understand the values of it, and make sure what's going on. So these are the two forms I wanted to talk about today, guys. Just make sure you have some ideas and some understandings of how it's working, why, when. And with that, let me go ahead and stop sharing my screen. Just making sure you guys are thinking and moving out there. I mean, it's a great time to be in real estate if you're a listing agent. It's a tougher time to be in real estate if you're a buyer's agent. If you're doing both, it's a hectic day. I've closed listings this month. I've closed buyer's agents this month. It's both of them are doable, but you've got to work hard and you've got to make sure what's happening, why, and how. So, guys, with that, that's pretty much all I've got today. I just want to make sure you have time to look at those forms, think about them, add them to your usual forms that you're using, and take advantage of them. It may take a couple more minutes, but whichever one you use first, if you use that form first, when you're going over the contract, it's going to make the contract that much smoother and easier. Remember, we talked about this form. This is straight off of what the notice form said that I talked about earlier. So you're going to explain that information one way or another. Giving them two different places to sign saying I've received it is just going to help you and make your life a little bit easier. With that, guys, appreciate it. Hope you have a great day, and we will see you on tomorrow where Kent and I will be going over another great class about going over the contract itself, as well as some great new agent training or different marketing ideas that you can take advantage of. With that, thank you, guys. Appreciate it.